Hello, I'm Martin Haven. Join me as we look back at the 1998 FIA GT Championship, a championship that pitched Porsche against Mercedes and Porsche against Chrysler in the GT2 category. 10 GT1 cars on the start line for the first race at a cold, wet and windy Oschersleben circuit near Magdeburg in the former East Germany, and the enthusiastic, if sparse, crowd here to see the might of the Stuttgart giants battling against each other. In GT2, it was Kohreuser's Marcos versus the Porsches that were numerically superior, and the Chrysler Vipers, run by the Oreca team, that were expected to set the pace. Well, sensation in qualifying was Jörg Müller in the number 8 factory Porsche, blitzing ahead of the field. The blue Person Motorsport CLK GTR V12 cars joining the AMG Mercedes team that ran the machines in the 97 series. But Jörg Müller's opening stint in the Porsche saw him pull away into a very commanding lead in the early stages of the race. The young single-seater race leading, as behind him Mercedes and Porsche got tangled up. Alain McNish being spun out by the number 2 Ricardo Zonta Klaus Ludwig car, and then almost getting caught by Martin Stretton in the Franz Conrad 66 car in the gravel traps. A pit stop for McNish to have the underfloor replaced on his car. The bumpy curbs at the short, tight Oschersleben circuit didn't suit the Porsche at all, and the floor was starting to separate. In GT2, the Chrysler Viper number 51, Olivier Beretta and Pedro Lamy versus Kohreuser and Harald Becker's Marcos, and a great battle with the front-engined V8 and V10 powered machines, with the 911 GT2 Porsches providing support. Jörg Müller handing over the race-leading car to Uwe Alsen, and at this stage of the race, Porsche looking in a fairly good situation despite McNish's retirement. Bernd Schneider coming in to hand over to his teammate Mark Webber, but in fact he decided to stay in the car for a second stint, and a long pit stop this because of problems with the starter, something that was to afflict the V12 cars all year long. So the Mercedes challenge taken up then by the number 2 machine, Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta, while the battle for second place was between the number 12 car of Jean-Marc Gounon and Marcel Thiemann and the number 8 car of Uwe Alsen and early leader Jörg Müller. They were ahead of the Zach Speed car of Sandy Grau and Andreas Schelt, but problems for the second of the Person Motorsport cars, Bernd Mailander and Christoph Boucher's machine retiring with transmission problems. Into the pits, Uwe Alsen, and this was not a scheduled pit stop. The number 8 Works Porsche, also in trouble with its under tray starting to split away. In trouble, the number 70 Marcos, and this is why it lost its nose. Harald Becker rather, being slightly shunted there by the Panos, run by David Brabham and Eric Bernard. Well, with new nose about to be lapped in the GT2 category by Olivier Beretta and Pedro Lamy, Claudia Herken and Stefan Ortelli for Rook Porsche second, ahead of the third Chrysler, the third-placed Chrysler Viper of Wendlinger and Donahue. David Donahue, the American driver, sharing with Carl Wendlinger. And problems coming back onto the circuit for the Porsche there. This is the Zach Speed car, number 5 of Sandy Grau and Andreas Schelt, running strongly. Another of the 911 GT1 98 cars, but run privately by the Zach Speed team. Thomas Boucher in trouble in the McLaren and getting clouted by the number 61 Elf Harboter 911 GT2 car. The McLaren, a race winner a year ago, and in 1998 really passed its sell-by date. Didn't stop Boucher and teammate Jeff Lees trying very hard with it, but it was clear that Evolution had left the car behind. The race leader at this stage then, in the closing part of the race, Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta. The old hand at Mercedes and the youngster who was the 1997 FIA Formula 3000 champion, combining superbly to lead the race as once more the number 8 machine came into the pits, and this time into permanent retirement. Both Works Porsches, having looked so quick early in the race, out as their under trays split away. So, building up a commanding lead, Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta, and their efforts helped by this problem for Mark Webber in the final couple of corners just before the pits. Webber losing a wheel, the Aussie, who shared with Bernd Schneider, bringing the car back in, and after a slightly elongated pit stop, going back out with 4 wheels on his wagon, setting quick lap times in the final stint, but not able to do anything about the car that romped to victory. The number 2 machine, Klaus Ludwig, Ricardo Zonta, leading a Mercedes 1-2-3 for the first time in championship history. One manufacturer claiming all 3 positions on the podium. Mark Webber coming through to take that third place ahead of the GT2 winning number 51 Chrysler Viper. So success for Mercedes and success for Chrysler. But that Mercedes 1, 2, 3, the AMG cars sandwiching the Person Motorsport car of Gunnar and Thiemann. Grau and Schelt, the best Porsche, the Zack-Speed car in fourth ahead of Bernard and Brabham's Panos. And it was Chrysler Vipers first and second, the Oreca cars, ahead of the best of the Porsches, and that was Franz Conrad and Nick Ham's 911 GT2 in third. Round two of the championship, a very different circuit and very different conditions, blazing sunshine and balmy spring temperatures at Silverstone, the full Grand Prix circuit. And once more it was Porsche on pole. This time though, Alan McNish, the Scot, had gone and put the number 7 car out of reach of the rest of the field. But David Brabham had run him very close in the Panos, which started second. The Mercedes lining up behind them, Uwe Altzen in the middle, but getting dropped away a little bit at the start by the number 2 machine, Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta's car. Well, problems early on for the Marcel Thiemann started number 12 machine. Person Motorsport car spinning out into the gravel and effectively finishing its race there and then. Well, problems after just 20 laps in the lead for the number 8 Porsche. Alan McNish having led at Silverstone from pole position and then dropping out of the race. So disappointing retirements for different reasons in the first 2 races of the year for McNish, and problems here for the leader, David Brabham, as he's tubbed out by an over-anxious Uwe Altzen. Brabham in the gravel, out of the race, and not happy.
I looked in the mirror and he was a couple of car lengths behind like he was normally. And I braked a bit later than normal just to make sure that he wasn't going to try anything. And he just tried something stupid. I just cannot believe it. And he's just obviously couldn't stop and he's hit me and round we go. So I'm absolutely disappointed for the whole team because, you know, it's the first time the Panos has been leading. We had a lot of people here from Motorola and Dijon, and it was an important race for us. But unfortunately, stupidity has just taken us out.
Well, no doubting the Australians' feelings there. A stop-and-go penalty for the Porsche effectively ruled out the chances for the number 8 car. And Bernd Schneider then leading the race from Bartels and Hahne, the best of the Porsches, in second and third place. So Altzen and Muller, despite their stop-and-go penalty, still the best of the rest. Well, the number 2 Mercedes working its way past the Zack-Speed car. And again, Ludwig and Zonta on fine form in the AMG car. Ricardo Zonta starting a trend that would last all season, taking no prisoners in traffic. Beretta and Lamy, the winners in GT2 at Oschersleben, leading again, but problems for the Franz Conrad car number 66 once more. They're third placed in Oschersleben, and with a tyre exploding at Silverstone. Everybody feeling the heat at the Northampton circuit. Well, the Porsche setting the fastest lap. Uwe Altzen, after his stop and go, after his collision with David Brabham, trying to make up for lost time. The number 6 Porsche, the best of the Zack-Speed cars, coming home in a strong third place. But there was little that Porsche could do this early in the season about the Mercedes. It may have been the 1997 V12 car, but it was good enough for Bernd Schneider and Mark Webber, romping away to victory in round 2 of the championship. So 2 races gone and 2 wins for Mercedes. Bernd Schneider delighted in this last race of the CLK GTR.
I've just told us this is the last race for the V12. You must be happy with that.
I'm absolutely happy with that. Now I got the first victory with the V12, and the last one, maybe not, because the person team is still running with it, and everybody had saw today that the car is still fighting for winning.
Well, Olivier Beretta winning the GT2 category in the Chrysler Viper that he would use to such good effect throughout the year. But Bernd Schneider confirming what Norbert Haug had just let slip, that the V8 brand new LM car would be raced by the AMG team for the rest of the series after the Le Mans break. Well, Le Mans not a championship round, but everybody still, of course, going there hoping to win the French Classic. Second for Porsche, not what they'd hoped for after qualifying at Silverstone, but better than nothing. Schneider, Ludwig, Webber and Zonta leading the Drivers' Championship from Uwe Altzen and Jürgen Müller, the best of the Porsches, along with the Person Motorsport drivers. So the GT2s, Beretta and Lamy winning again, this time from Michel Neugarten, Gert Ruck and Marco Spinelli in their car. and Uwe Sick and Axel Ruhr making Porsche 911 GT2's second and third. But Beretta and Lamy leading the championship from their teammates, Wendlinger, Donington. The championship resumed at Hockenheim for round 3. Of course, in the interim, Mercedes had debuted their V8 LM cars at the Le Mans 24 Hours. The new V8 failed, but it was used in the championship to good effect by Bernd Schneider to take pole from Ricardo Zonta at the first race of the post-Le Mans era. And the new V8 car proved to be so much of an evolution that Porsche were left scratching their heads. Bernd Schneider pushing hard as Jürg Müller brings his car into the pits with vibrations and flat spots. Well, the early mechanical problems for Porsche seem to have been cured, but driver error by Yannick Dalmas here, spinning out on the back of the ultra-high-speed Hockenheim circuit, trying to find a way past the GT2 Viper. Well, that effectively ruled Dalmas and McNish out of the race, and this effectively ruled Sandy Grau's Zakspeed car out of the race, blazing at the rear end. Dramatic looking fire, the driver desperately trying to find a marshal's post to pull over before he bailed out. Well, as the Porsche armies started to fall by the wayside, Bernd Schneider and Mark Webber leading from Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta. They may have failed at Le Mans. Porsche winning with Alan McNish and Sebastian Ortelli, I beg your pardon, and Laurent Aiello. But Mercedes continuing in their winning ways in the GT series. Well, this is the third place car. Jean-Marc Goudon and Marcel Thiemann doing a strong job, along with their teammates Christoph Bouchou and Bernd Mailander in third and fourth. So Mercedes running 1, 2, 3, 4 at this stage. And in GT2, Olivier Beretta and Pedro Lamy leading from Carl Wendlinger and David Donoghue. Donoghue, along with Justin Bell and Luca Drudi, had won GT2 at Le Mans for the Viper team. Well, problems for the number 56 Rook Porsche. Claudio Hürtgen and Stefan Ortelli ran the fastest of the GT2 Rooks all year long, the 56 car, but it was stricken more often than not with mechanical problems. The number 11 Mercedes refusing to fire up and being push-started, this strictly against the regulations. Outside assistance allowed to restart the car, but then it must be switched off and it must start again under its own power. And as a result, the 11 car black flagged out of the race. So Goudon and Thiemann continuing, but Bouchou and Mailander's car being black flagged for that push start. And as we saw throughout the season, a hot V12 CLK GTR, a very tricky car to restart. After 51 laps, then Schneider, Webber, Ludwig and Zonta. Once more, the best placed of the works Porsches, the car of Altzen and Müller. Not always the quickest, but they seem to have better luck. Bouncing around, the aerodynamic balance of the V12 cars always made them look a real handful to drive. Their great traction in tricky conditions, keeping them in the running. Another spectacular fire for the Porsche. Uwe Altzen leaving the track at high speed and a blaze at the back of the 911 GT1 98. Another dramatic looking retirement from the Hockenheim race. Everybody getting very hot and bothered. Altzen disconsolately slamming the door. I don't think he even realised there was a blaze there. The Panos then up into third place with 3 laps to go, ahead of the number 12 Mercedes. Well, the CLK GTR still racing with the front runners, but the new V8 LM car on its FIA GT Series debut finishes first and second at Hockenheim. It hadn't been homologated, but it was given allowance to run. Schneider and Webber winning. Ludwig and Zonta in second place. It was Mercedes' third win of the season and the first 1-2 for the AMG crew. It was also the first 1-2 for the V8 engined LM car. GT2, third win for Olivier Beretta and Pedro Lamy, the 2 ex-Grand Prix drivers, looking very much the class of the GT2 field, and they were certainly starting to set a pattern they wanted to continue for the rest of the season. So here's the result then. Panos a good third, another podium position for them. Goudon and Thiemann fourth in the Person Motorsport car. Thomas Bashir and Jeff Lees outclassed in terms of speed, but reliability got them fifth and points ahead of McNish and Dalmas. Schneider Webber leading the championship now from Ludwig, Zonta and their Mercedes teammates Thiemann and Goudon in third. GT2 Beretta, Lamy and Wendlinger Donington. Chrysler Viper 1-2 ahead of Bruno Eichmann and Sascha Maassen, the best of the Rook Porsches. The 911 GT2 teams following along behind them. And the championship being led by, no surprise, the Viper drivers. Well, join us after the break for more action from the FIA GT Series. The FIA GT Championship at the tiny circuit of Dijon-Prenois in the heart of France. Hard to believe that just a decade beforehand this had been a full Formula One circuit. You would think it would be a little tight for kart racing. But Mercedes first and second on the grid. Dominant performance in qualifying by Bernd Schneider, lapping a second quicker than anybody else in the field, and completely destroying Porsche's hopes of a pole position start. Schneider leading away from Klaus Ludwig, who was second on the grid. And 50 minutes after the start, the race leader, lapping the number 8 Porsche, Uwe Altzen, had started third in qualifying. Some indication of the dominance of the car. Panos also falling to the race leader. Bernd Schneider really in scintillating form, brimful of confidence, and the hot, tight, slippery Dijon circuit, and just decimating the opposition. Zach Speed Porsche also having no answer to the speed of Schneider and Weber. Ludwig and Zonta, their closest rivals, in second place. The Works Porsches third and fourth, but lapped. Problems, though, after Schneider had handed over the race-leading car to Mark Webber. A puncture at the back of the car pitched him into the barriers, and it heavily damaged the back of the car. You can see him limping around here. That left rear puncture was the cause of all the problems. Webber doing a good job to get the car back to the pits. That handed the lead to the number 2 machine. Klaus, Ludwig and Ricardo. Zonta had started in second place. Now they led by a lap from Dalmas McNish. Schneider and Webber in third place. Well, a long pit stop for the number 1 Mercedes to try and replace damaged bodywork at the rear of the car. And finally, the team were forced to call Mark Webber in. The bodywork wasn't staying on the car, and they decided it was not safe to continue. So the number 1 car retired for the first time all year, and the number 2 Mercedes leading. So the number 2 car winning, Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta.
Was something going on with the car. Webber was driving, very unfortunate for the team. It would have been a 1-2. Now it's only a 1. Better than nothing for me. Fantastic. I'm very, very happy.
So 2 wins in the year for Bernd Schneider and Mark Webber. 2 wins in the year now for Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta. But disappointment for the reigning champion to have his car retired in round 4 of the series. Dalmas and Manish second, but a lap behind. The V8 LM cars really were starting to look almost untouchable. Ludwig and Zonta then winning and taking the series lead back from Schneider and Webber. And this was a feature now of the championship. The 2 Mercedes pairs would swap the lead throughout the season. In GT2, Olivier Beretta and Pedro Lamy, 4 wins from 4 starts and starting to look firmly on target for the championship title. Carl Wendlinger and David Donahue just not able to match them on pace, but a good third place for Jean-Pierre Jarier and Christophe Lafont in their French GT Championship 911 GT2. Another Grand Prix circuit, but a current one this time for round 5 of the championship, the Hungaroring at Budapest. Well, qualifying had seen Mercedes first and second, Schneider and Ludwig first and second on the grid from Dalmas and Wallach. Bob Wallach stepping into the number 8 Porsche, but a big crash into the first corner as the person car gets it completely wrong and takes out the middle of the field. And once more is the unlucky number 66 Conrad and Ham car that is one of those involved. The McLaren also involved. Thomas Boucher had been on honeymoon at Dijon, didn't race there, and first race back in the championship, he was immediately out. Well, the race red flagged and stopped before the end of the first lap, so they would go and do it again. Look at the crash as the person car on the right of the screen gets over into the pit lane onto the loose. The Boucher Mailander car spinning, hitting the McLaren, and half the field being caught out, not quite able to avoid them. Heavily damaged number 66 car. So away they go again. Well, the leading lights have managed to avoid that trouble, so once more Porsche versus Mercedes with the Panos and the Zaxby cars in there as well. Chrysler Vipers chasing Oreca, pole position for him on the Hungaroring circuit, his first pole position of the year after a very impressive qualifying, but he was given a stop and go penalty for refueling just too late before the pits closed after the restart, and his race lead was thrown away. So Oreca probably fairly upset, rejoining to try and do something in GT2. Meanwhile, the number 1 car, Schneider, watching his teammate Mark Webber leading the race after he'd taken over. The number 8 Mercedes in second place, and the Porsches chasing them. The two works cars just left with themselves to battle. The Panos in third place early on, but Volek and Muller and Dalmas and Magnish third and fourth at this stage, as the Panos came in to pit from 5th position. Sudden drama around the car and an explosive flash fire. Eric Bernard and David Brabham and the rest of the team escaping without injury. Brabham blown away from the car by the explosion of fuel, and Bernard, despite worries that he may have suffered facial damage there, actually it was just the brightness of the explosion that affected his eyes for a moment. Well, Olivier Beretta and Pedro Lamy stopping from the lead of GT1 and losing first place there. The 52 car going out with a differential failure, and that meant that Rook Porsche would win GT2 for the first time in the year. Sascha Marson and Bruno Eichmann leading in the 57 car from the 51 Viper, the Marcos and the number 60 Harbour car. But no doubting who was going to win this race. Bernd Schneider, watching from the pit wall as teammate Mark Webber brought the number 1 car back into the winner's circle for the 3rd time of the year. Mercedes number 2 finishing in 2nd place. The Rook Porsche winning GT2 right behind him.
The team did a remarkable job. I think we were on the right strategy to change tires after every stint. I think Porsche got that wrong because the car has a lot of potential in the meantime, and I think you could see in terms of quickest lap times they're really close. But I think the problem was not to have had a tire change at every race, but it's getting closer, and I think that was great motorsport today.
Well, great motorsport also for the Rook Porsche team at Bruno Eichmann and Sascha Marson winning GT2, the only race the Vipers didn't win in GT2. Oops, given the game away there. So Schneider and Webber from Ludwig and Zonta, and Schneider and Webber in charge of the championship with that 3rd win of the series from them, ahead of Dalmas and Magnish. Ludwig and Zonta, well, 1 point ahead of Schneider and Webber. Schneider and Webber now starting to fight back and on a roll. Marcel Team and Jean-Marc Gounod, Bernard Brabham and the rest left trailing in their wake. So Beretta and Lamy failing to win for the first and only time that a Chrysler Viper didn't win during the year. But Beretta and Lamy's run of successes, 4 out of 4, stopped at the Hungaroring. Still the championship leaders, though, from teammates Carl Wendlinger and David Donoghue, but Eichmann and Marson doing themselves some favours there, 3rd in the series. So on to round 6, Suzuka in Japan, and after the 500-kilometre races that had started the series, the first and only, indeed, 1,000-kilometre race. Track temperature, 41 degrees centigrade. Onboard cockpit temperatures rumoured to be around 60 degrees. Absolutely astonishing heat in Suzuka. And the Mercedes teams starting with just 2 drivers in their cars, but everybody else bulking up with a 3rd driver for this long-distance enduro. Well, Mercedes 1st and 2nd, it didn't seem to matter what the circuit, they were very much the dominant force, but this time Alan McNish was giving chase, very competitive indeed in the Porsche. Gets ahead of Ricardo Zonta in traffic to go up into 2nd place, and well on the pace of the race leaders Bernd Schneider and Mark Webber, with Stefan Ortelli in the car, but McNish getting caught out as Zonta misjudges it under braking and thumps him off the track. Well, bad enough that McNish was dropped out of the race, but he was left there for an extra lap in the gravel as well.
Zonta just drove into the back of me. It's the second time it's happened this year, and to be honest, I don't think it is the sort of driving that any form of motorsport should advocate, and to do it 2 times, to me, I think it's just deplorable. I'm going to have a word with him.
You think the race is lost for you now?
Oh yeah, because of one stupid manoeuvre 6 laps into a 171 lap race. Personally, I don't think that's the intelligence of a driver looking to get to Formula 1.
Well, Ricardo Zonta pulled out of the gravel traps first, as Alan McNish was left to sweat it out for another 2 laps before the marshals got to him. Came in for a stop-and-go penalty, but he was still in the race. McNish, as you could clearly see from that interview, less than chuffed with Zonta's judgment. Well, again, we saw another great GT2 battle, the front-engine cars fighting it out. The V10 Chrysler engine Vipers and the V8 Chevrolet-engined Marcos. Koreuser and Harold Beck have been joined by Christian Van from the British GT series for the first time all year, and that was a trio that would continue throughout the series. Well, Beretta and Lamy joined by Dominique Dupuis from the French GT series, and Wendlinger being joined in his car by Justin Bell, the reigning GT2 champion, and Hiro Matsuda. The Panos battling away at the front of the field, so too the second works Porsche of Altzen and Muller, but being dropped behind by the race leaders. Bernd Schneider here seen handing over to Mark Webber. In second place, the number 2 Mercedes, despite its early problems, Klaus, Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta. But Schneider, perhaps the fittest of all drivers in this series, even he finding trouble in the heat. Marcos losing a window. Might have slowed them marginally in terms of outright pace, but at least it would allow a little bit of cool air, or cooler air in, as the evening started to cool down. The Altzen and Muller car rejoining, having been rescued by the marshals and having gone off track there. But once more, Mercedes first and second. The number 7 Porsche, Dalmas, McNish and Ortelli in third place, ahead of Bouchou and Mailänder. The person cars, like the AMG Works Mercedes, sticking with their original 2-driver lineup. Lights on as the 1,000-kilometre Enduro continues into the night-time hours. And the number 1 machine running as reliably as a Swiss watch to win the only 1,000-kilometre race of the series, to go with their 3 wins so far from 5 previous starts.
It's very hard, especially after the disappointment in Le Mans. We could show that we're in a good shape, and we were just unlucky there.
You led from the start, it looked like you had no problems.
Yeah, I would say the race could be. And Porsche guys had not those problems with Ricardo Zonta, and afterwards they got punished again. I mean, their guys were a little bit unlucky. They set the fastest lap, that means they're in a good shape. It was just unlucky. Maybe next time we'll see more interest race.
Well, even Bernd Schneider realising that the Dalmas McNish Ortelli's Porsche main problem was a Formula 3000 champion called Ricardo. They finished third, 3 laps down. Ludwig and Zonta 2 laps down on the indefatigable Schneider and Webber. But for Ricardo Zonta's error there, perhaps we would have seen a very different race. But it was Schneider and Webber who came away with a narrow 3-point championship lead in GT1 from Suzuka. Beretta, Lamy, Dupuis beating Wendlinger, Bell, Matsuda, Oyser, Becker, Van and the rest at Suzuka, continuing to lead the GT2 championship. Now looking all but certain to take victory in the series. Carl Wendlinger, their only realistic threat, and he was fast falling behind. Join us for more in just a moment. 1998 FIA GT Championship at Donington Park. Mercedes first and second on the grid, but look at this. The 2 works Porsches inserting themselves between the silver AMG cars down on the run into the first corner. And at Redgate, Mercedes first and second has become Porsche first and second. Bernd Schneider out on the grass, having started from pole, and he'll rejoin in the middle of the GT2 class leading battle. 125 laps to go, so plenty of time to recover. But Porsche first and second, they'd looked very quick earlier in the season. They'd been quick at Suzuka. Could they now post their first win of the season in the second half of the year? Well, Alan McNish at home at Donington Park leading the race, certainly hoped so, over Altzen behind, having to give second place over to the number 2 car started by Ricardo Zonta. The Brazilian really gaining in confidence and speed all year long. Bernd Schneider fighting back, and here taking a place off the Eric Bernard and David Brabham Panos. That's to go back up into 4th place. He was 8th at the end of the first lap. But it was all to go wrong for Alan McNish. The judges deciding that his race had started slightly before everybody else's. He had overtaken before they crossed the start line. Well, he had started 3rd on the grid. Uwe Alsen had started 7th on the grid, but somehow got away with being in 2nd place at the start line. The judges clearly not able to take in 2 cars at the same time. So after the stop-and-go penalty, Alan McNish really disappointed to lose the early leads. Mercedes now 1 and 2. GT2 battle absolutely fascinating. Koorois's Marcos was on pole once more. Stefan Ortelli had started last after having an overboosting problem in qualifying. And he reeled in the leaders, passed both Chrysler Vipers in 2 corners, and then showed them what they hadn't been able to do all race so far, i.e. that it was possible to overtake Kooroise. Having seen that, Ortelli once more had a go, beg your pardon, Olivier Beretta once more had a go, and then got past, and Carl Vendiger followed suit fairly shortly after. But Kooroise had given us a fantastic battle for the lead of GT2 early on. Now Stefan Ortelli in the 56 Rooks Porsche with its sequential gearbox, leading the 2 Chrysler Vipers. Bernd Schneider leading Klaus Ludwig in 1st and 2nd. The Panos 3rd just before the pit stops. But that was to change because the number 2 car had a much quicker pit stop than the number 1 Mercedes, and positions were reversed as they came out of the pit lane. Klaus Ludwig leading from the number 1 car. So Ludwig and Zonta leading from Schneider and Webber. Dalmas McNish in 3rd place in the number 7 Works Porsche, ahead of Bernard and Brabham despite their stop-and-go penalty, or perhaps because of maybe they could have been leading the race overall. It's always hard to tell. Well, battle between the Mercedes, the 1 and 2 cars swapping position as Eric Bernard has a prop shaft let go and he retires the Panos, and that must be a frightening thing. Prop shaft, of course, running beside the driver's elbow down through the centre of the car. The number 1 machine then, Bernd Schneider and Mark Webber starting to romp away from Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta. The Aussie doing a great job in the middle stint. Ludwig unable to match his pace, and then Schneider and Zonta fighting all the way through. But the car that had started from pole was once more beset by problems. Stefan Ortelli bringing the 56 Rook Porsche into the pits. GT2 being led by Beretta and Lamy from Carl Wendlinger, and Justin Bell having his 2nd race in the car of the year. But there was no doubting who was going to win the GT1 category. After Porsche's early problems, their promise had melted away, and the number 1 machine coming to line. Bernd Schneider and Mark Webber winning once more. Donington, the 7th race, 7th win for Mercedes, their 4th 1-2, their 3rd 1-2 victory in a row, as Ludwig and Zonta come home in 2nd place. And the beers are out because Mercedes in round 7 of 10 have tied up the team's championship. So Schneider and Webber the winners from Ludwig and Zonta. Dalmas and McNish disappointed to finish only 3rd, a lap down, ahead of their teammates in 4th place. Gudon Thiemann in the Persson car ahead of Armin Hahne, and Andreas Schultz in the Zakspeed car gaining a point there as well. And now it started to look as though Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta might be being left behind. It was only a 7-point margin, but Bernd Schneider and Mark Webber were starting to ease away. Would it continue? Well, Oyster-Becker and Van disqualified from 2nd place, but they gained on the last corner. So Franz Conrad and Alfred Hager 2nd ahead of Justin Bell and Carl Vendinger in GT2, but Olivier Beretta and Pedro Lamy winning again. Another victory for them. Their 6th from 7 starts in the GT2 category, really running away with the championship. Round 8 of the series at Austria's Grand Prix circuit, the A1 ring, and once more cold and foggy conditions. But once more, that didn't stop the Mercedes starting from the front of the grid. 1st and 2nd again. But this time, pole was taken by Ricardo Zonta. He'd been on pole at Donington Park, and he'd also been on pole at Austria. Ricardo Zonta now really starting to show great race pace. The Persson Motorsport cars coming down the inside of the first corner, nearly taking their colleagues in the AMG cars out, but somehow it all stayed together. Bernd Schneider having trouble here, fighting off the Persson car. Little collision there, and the number 11 machine off onto the gravel. Christophe Bouchou coming back on and recovering slowly. Bernd Schneider being very forceful in his determination to stay right with Ricardo Zonta if at all possible. Well, moments later we were to see bits flying off the number 1 car, the little front nose wing disappearing there from the left-hand front corner. Now these are vital on the V8 cars to provide extra downforce at the front and an extra bit of turn-in sharpness. There it goes, damaged in the collision with the number 11 car, and that was to induce a handling problem that would beset the Porsche, the Mercedes all race. This problem for the number 8 Porsche, fairly evident. The nose had come off, and Jürgen Müller coming back into the pits with the wiring loom trailing on the road, and obviously a very obvious problem for them. Massive spin for Christophe Bouchou out of 5th place, got the car onto the curbs exiting the final turn and went round in a dizzying number of high-speed spins. Look at that again, on the belly of the car across the curbs, and it seems to pick up speed as it starts to spin. Well, riding with the Panos and the Bernard Brabham car, just avoiding the spinning number 2 Mercedes, which was collected by the 12 car Jean-Marc Gounon. Well, that was a problem for the number 2 machine. But despite that, it continued. Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta's challenge was not yet over. Battling with the Works Porsche and the Person Motorsport cars, and Austria really gave us a very exciting race at the head of GT1. Schneider and Webber leading by just 4 seconds from Lagos and Tanso in the Panos, with Bernard Brabham racing in the American series for the Panos team. GT2 being led, do I need to tell you, by 51 car. But Austria was not to be their race. Karl Wendlinger and Justin Bell doing a great job to lead the category after Beretta and Lamy ran into early problems that you saw there in slow motion. Bruno Eichmann joined by Mike Hasemans in the 57 Rook car. Pit stop time, and Bernd Schneider bailing out to hand over to Mark Webber. The number 1 car, another smooth pit stop by the AMG team. Klaus Ludwig watching the monitors, having done his job as Ricardo Zonta tries to go out and win the race. On board once more with the Panos and the French pair doing a great job. Jean-Marc Gounon leaving the pits in the number 12 Person Motorsport car, having lost time mid-race, as had the Panos. The number 2 Mercedes leading the GT1 rankings from the number 1 car of Schneider and Webber. Bartels being joined by Max Angelelli in the Zaxby Porsche in 3rd place, ahead of Alan McNish and Yannick Dalmas. Jean-Marc Gounon, Marcel Thiemann battling with the Zaxby car and their teammates in the number 11 car, Bouchou and Mailander, and once more problems for Beretta and Lamy. They weren't leading the class and they were having pit stop problems. So Karl Wendlinger, who'd had a very torrid time in qualifying at his home circuit in Austria, finding that the race now, unlike qualifying, seemed to be coming to him. Great inter-Nissan battle between the 2 Person Motorsport cars for 3rd place. Jean-Marc Gounon, Marcel Thiemann just leading Christophe Bouchou and Bernd Mailander, and with the speed of the V8 cars and the Works Porsches, those two quite often finding themselves in a battle just between themselves, and Austria a very good example of that. Ricardo Zonta leading as the Person Motorsport number 11 car fires its way out of the pit lane after its pit stop. The number 12 sister car coming down the other side of the guardrail on the racetrack. This is a drag race between the two, but Bernd Mailander gets it all wrong, hits the barrier exiting the pit lane and goes straight into retirement. Well, trying desperately to keep his track position alive against his teammates after the pit stop. He's absolutely livid with himself. And there it is. The 2 cars side by side. And Mailander slamming into the pit wall. And the Person Motorsport team a bit bewildered, but not half as bewildered as Bernd Mailander. He just couldn't believe he'd done that. Battle for 3rd then between the number 7 Porsche of Yannick Dalmas and the number 6 Zaxby Porsche, Michel Bartels. Great onboard camera work once more, showing us the heart of the action. And the 2 911 GT1 98 cars, the factory cars and the Zaxby cars battling away for position. The Panos just about to head into retirement with low oil pressure. The oil pressure was low because it was all pouring out of the engine, up the back of the car and onto the track. So another strong run from the Panos, not to end in a podium position. Klaus Ludwig being shown there in the inset as Ricardo Zonta motors through to win the number 2 car. And Mercedes 5th 1-2 of the year, their 8th victory. This time Ludwig and Zonta leading home Schneider and Webber, once more ahead of Dalmas McNish in a podium position for Porsche.
3 points, only difference now. I spun because there was oil and I came on the oil. Marcel the same, so we made a double tulip. But for me, it's the last race in Europe, and for me, it's so fantastic to win. I was really crying. I was so happy. Unbelievable.
Klaus Ludwig winning his last ever race in Europe. He had announced his retirement, and Karl Wendlinger winning his only race of the year, but at least it was at home in Austria. Good result for the lanky ex-Formula 1 driver. So Ludwig, Zonta, Schneider and Webber, Mercedes 1-2 once more. The Works Porsche in 3rd place, the Zagspeed car a strong 4th ahead of the Person Motorsport car in 5th, and Bashir and Lees gaining a point once more from reliability. Schneider and Webber leading by just 3 from Ludwig and Zonta. This battle will continue all year. Yannick Dalmas and Alain McNish now starting to distance themselves from the rest of the teams in 3rd place in the championship. Wendlinger and Bell winning here from Beretta and Lamy. Conrad and Hager in 3rd place, the best of the GT2 Porsches, but Beretta and Lamy confirmed as series champions. Karl Wendlinger could not now catch them. Olivier, Beretta and Pedro Lamy, the GT2 winners for 1998. Join us for more action in a moment as the series ends in the States. Final 2 rounds of the 1998 FIA GT Championship. Round 9 at Homestead in Florida. This IndyCar and NASCAR oval being used, but not as an oval by the GT Championship. The front stretch and back stretch only being used, and then what was supposed to be a tight Mickey Mouse infield circuit actually turned out not to be half bad. Conditions ideal for racing on the Sunday, if a little hot and sticky. And the onboard cooling systems in the Mercedes, a fan blowing dry ice around. You can see the smoke there billowing around in the car. But the early dry weather interrupted by a tropical downpour. As they say in Miami, if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes. Everybody out on slicks. It started to drip and drizzle, and then it was torrential rain, forcing yellow flags out, everybody making pit stops, or almost everybody making pit stops for wet weather tyres as the safety car was about to be launched. So Homestead, another pole position for Ricardo Zonta, another pole in GT2 incidentally as well for Koreuser, really getting it together. He had actually tied Stefan Ortelli for pole at Austria, exactly to the 1000th. But Ortelli did it first, so Koreuser's run of pole positions. Suzuka, Donington, equal pole at Austria, pole again at Homestead. Well, tricky wet weather conditions survived by everybody, and as the conditions dried, a problem for Mark Webber. And this perhaps might have been one of the turning points of the season. Webber losing the lead there to the number 2 car. So Ludwig, Zonta and Schneider and Webber just 0.6 apart. Bernard Brabham running very strongly in America for the American Panos team in 3rd place ahead of Uwe Alsen and Jörg Müller after Alain McNish and Yannick Dalmas had problems. And Mark Webber finding the gravel traps, caught out under braking. Well, this was a very disappointing moment indeed in the Australians' season. And Bernd Schneider with the AMG crew watching there from the pit lane. Webber towed out of the gravel and able to rejoin, but his chances of victory now seem slender as he was lapped. Problems also for the Panos, not a loose bonnet. In fact, Eric Bernard, in a momentary lapse of concentration, had slammed it into the tyre wall, and a fairly heavy frontal impact meant that a good result, a podium position for them, was now out of the question. So Klaus Ludwig bringing the number 2 Mercedes to the line in Homestead to win. Ricardo Zonta this time watching his teammate from the pit wall. Uwe Alsen and Jörg Müller second for Porsche. Alan McNish and Yannick Dalmas beset by a misfire that dropped them out of a second place podium position, but they managed to finish third in the end, ahead of Schneider and Webber, and that meant the championship flip-flopped. Ludwig and Zonta would go to the last round, 4 points ahead of Schneider and Webber. Both teams really needed to win the final race to win the championship. Well, the championship settled in GT2. Beretta and Lamy winning once more from Claudia Herkenen, Stefan Ortelli, Oyser, Becker and Van, third place ahead of Trunk and Muller. Karl Wendlinger in third place, Justin Bell in fourth in the series, tied on points with Franz Conrad. Beretta and Lamy just extending their points. And so to Laguna Seca, California for the final round of the championship. And again, a blistering pole by Ricardo Zonta. Bernd Schneider once more unable to find an answer to the speed of the young Brazilian in qualifying. And the tight, twisty and high-speed, impressive Laguna Seca track, a great and fitting venue for the last round of the series. Battle between the number 1 car and the number 7 machine. Alan McNish taking second place from Bernd Schneider early on, before suddenly finding himself pitched out of the race as he lost his clutch without warning. The car locked up, spun him off the road and stalled. And the Scot, who'd been looking very competitive indeed again at Laguna, was out of action. Pit stop for Bernd Schneider, didn't change his tyres, a quick stop for him, and he rejoins in the lead. But the number 1 car was about to hit problems in the form of the number 8 Porsche. Ove Alsen taking third place as the Panos runs out of road. Bernard Brabham once more in the Panos, on board with the number 1 machine. Schneider and Webber leading from Ludwig and Zonta. Alsen and Muller in third place, and the leaders at this stage had lapped everybody up to fourth, the Bernard and Brabham Panos. But it was soon all to go wrong for Schneider and Webber, because although this was not a battle for position on the racetrack, although he was coming up to lap Uwe Alsen decided he would not be lapped. Schneider eventually managed to find a way past after many laps of trying, but a whole bunch of time had been lost to Uwe Alsen. Schneider less than happy with Alsen's driving, and probably justifiably so. The Porsche was not leading, it was about to be lapped, and would lose nothing by being a gentleman and letting the Mercedes through. What it did do, though, was interrupt a tense battle for the championship between the number 1 and number 2 teams. Klaus Ludwig did the opening stint, now in civvies, well, in team uniform, watching his teammate Ricardo Zonta come in after the stop and immediately going back out with new tyres, finding a patch of oil and running off the road. Now, we saw this on camera. What we hadn't seen is that Mark Webber, who had taken over Schneider's car for the final stint, also hit the same patch of oil, and the race leader going off. Webber had been in second, came out in the lead, but by the time they had both hit the oil and had their pit stops, Webber for new tyres, Zonta not, the lead had changed. The number 2 car was leading, the number 1 car having to play catch-up. Well, Mark Webber really put in perhaps the driving stint of his Mercedes career, closing down a 16-second advantage to under 8 in about as many laps. Suddenly, Ricardo Zonta's advantage was extended, though. He responded with faster and faster laps, even as Webber was starting to come into visual contact. Webber was then caught up behind the number 8 car, driven this time by Jörg Müller, and Müller again refused to allow the number 1 car to lap him properly, Webber having to almost elbow his way past. And at that stage, the race for the championship, the race for victory, was effectively lost, because the gap went back out to around 16 seconds. And there was a poignant picture, the championship passing from the youngster, Bernd Schneider, to the old driver. Can that be right? Klaus Ludwig. Yes, indeed it was. Because victory for Ricardo Zonta and Klaus Ludwig meant that Ludwig would finish his racing career with a championship win. Victory then in the final race, their third win in a row for Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta, and another Mercedes 1-2. Zonta and Ludwig the champions by a narrow margin from their teammates. Well, Ricardo Zonta on his way now to Formula One, but he really does need to learn how to do a victory donut. The young Brazilian delighted, though, to have won the race and the championship. And Klaus Ludwig, what a story to end his career. Schneider and Weber came up short in the last cast, but not for lack of trying. The intervention of Uwe Altzen and Jürg Müller in the final race really scotching the championship for them. So in the end, an 8-point advantage for Ludwig and Zonta, but it couldn't really have been closer. AMG Mercedes winning the overall championship, and Porsche coming away from the series. 10 races, no wins. The GT2 category won once more for the 8th time in 10 starts by Olivier Beretta and Pedro Lamy's car. And the Chrysler Vipers winning 9 out of 10 races. Beretta and Lamy the champions, Viper the champion team, and a dominant performance by the best cars and the best drivers in the GT2 series. The Porsches and the Marcos really not able to offer a reliable enough challenge to them. Well, Mercedes won the championship, Porsche won Le Mans. It was a tough GT series though for Porsche. Early speed, unreliability, matched by an equal measure of bad luck. Porsche just couldn't quite make it. The Viper Oreca team winning quite comfortably the team's title and the driver's title in GT2. Ex-Grand Prix drivers, ex-Grand Prix and top single-seater team. But Klaus Ludwig retiring again as a world champion. Well, that's it from me, Martin Haven. Until the next time, goodbye.